All right, guys, I had a few folks reach out asking for a little more detailed video specifically on my electronics and how I have them set up on the Vibe Shearwater 125 with the electronics pod, and then I'm also running the trolling motor, so we'll just give a quick overview of how I have things set up. Probably not going to get into detail with specific parts that I'm using. It's all pretty standard 12-volt SAE items found on Amazon. I don't think I've purchased a single thing that hasn't come off of Amazon in order to complete these projects. Do keep in mind I haven't really stress tested a lot of this stuff yet, so by all means feel free to change things, make it work for your particular situations, and get out and test it. My lakes are frozen over, so very little time in the boat to this point with testing out all this equipment. So I'm running the Garmin 9-inch with side imaging. I'm not going to pull the pod, but you do have to put a little bit of a spacer on the transducer, but we'll give a rundown of how I actually have things wired. I kept it pretty simple because I don't really need to run a whole lot. I don't have any deck lights or anything like that, or nav lights on switches, so just very simple. So I've got the graph mounted on a universal RAM fish finder mount found on Amazon. It's about $23, give or take. Should be able to find other options that fit your specific models. I do have USB voltmeter. It's on a separate switch. So as you can see, it's lighting up, and that'll power on the actual USB charger and then also give me the voltage. On the back side of the fish finder, I haven't done anything with my wiring yet because, like I said, I haven't had a lot of time to test this yet, so I may ultimately end up moving it. So I just have the bulk transducer coiled up here. Power I have coiled up and stuffed in a section of rod sock. For powering the graph, I used an SAE 12-volt plug, and then I wired a male onto my graph power. So what that enables me to do is, obviously I've got all the graph power wire outside, but once this is unplugged, that's actually the charge port for my battery as well. So the entire pod, I pull it out, stick it in a milk crate on my shelf in my garage, and I can just charge it right there, or I can run an extension cord over here and just leave the chargers right in the boat. So power unplugs, cap for that port if I ever want to cap it off. And then we'll move to what we have going on the inside. So I used a 12-volt SAE splitter. It's got an inline fuse on it. I did have to cut the male end off the backside of the splitter. I put on these spade connectors so that it would connect directly to my battery. Like I said, it's got the inline fuse. I left that male connection on there because the backside of the plug comes with a male, so those are connected right. On the backside of the USB, again, I cut off the plug end, put the spade connectors on there. That way it would connect right to the backside of that USB 12-volt charger. And then I just have my phone charger down in there. Probably need to get a little bit longer cable to reach where I'm going to have my phone. If I decide that the pod is ultimately going to be my final position for my graph, I'm going to notch the pod right here so I can feed the excess transducer wire through, and then I have a Yak Attack cable gland or through-hole wiring kit coming that'll allow me to just stick a few inches of transducer wire up out of the top to power the backside of the graph. All right, so on the trolling motor, I'm running the Yak Gadget motor pod for now. I have no doubt I'll ultimately end up upgrading my motor, whether I just get the water snake because it's a little better designed for this pod, or if I go with a bow mount or transom mount motor. I've only had a few hours out in the kayak, and one thing I immediately noticed is that this is kind of a cumbersome setup, which again, it's this old, 27 thrust motor that I'm using. It doesn't quite work with this pod, and it's a little cumbersome. But basically I This is a free motor. I cut the shaft down. I'm just using some like irrigation fittings and a cable gland with some glue. The threads didn't quite line up, but I kind of mashed it all together to make it work so that I could gland off the top. This is, some wire coating that I found on Amazon. It's much like the rod sock that I'm using on the transducer pod. You can actually find it that'll fit over your cable. So just to keep things clean and looking sharp, I found that and wrapped my cable going back. That's powering or connected to my PWM. I just used a waterproof conduit box that I got off of Amazon, and then a little cheap PWM that I found on Amazon as well. I have this all connected to a Ram cup holder mount, so that all sits right down in my cup holder off to that side of my seat. Keeps it out of the way and easily accessible. So it all just kind of sits there like that. Power to the motor is coming out the left side of the box, and then power to the battery is coming out the back side of the box. As you see, I'm using these quick connects, and the reason I included those in there is that if that PWM fails, I can take the power right to the motor by switching out the connections there. Battery box, I don't have it plugged in, and this isn't necessarily where it sits. I usually put it behind my crate. I actually had it inside my crate before I loaded it full of tackle, but just kind of set it up here for the purpose of this video. I'm using the 55 amp hour amped outdoors battery. And then I just found a waterproof box at Walmart that was almost the exact dimensions of that battery, so that's what we're using for now. Haven't had an opportunity to stress test it, but with the PWM, I think I probably won't have any issue using the trolling motor all day throughout the day. So that's pretty much it. I do have an extra port coming out of my battery box to power a GoPro, but haven't really had a chance to test that as of yet. Probably before I get out this spring, I'll do another video going over all the mods that I've put on throughout the winter. Did make some changes after taking the kayak out and demoing a few things. So once we get some more time in the water, I'm sure I'll have an update on what we're doing. Let me know if you have specific questions about wiring your pod or need help finding parts. I'm not going to take the time to list everything in the description of this video, but basically, like I said at the beginning, if you just go on to Amazon or Google, just look for 12 volt SAE, and that's primarily the components I'm using, or just 12 volt accessories, and that'll dial you in on a variety of price points and a variety of options. The one thing I will say is when you start drilling into this pod, do keep in mind that Vibe currently does not have replacement pods for sale, so I didn't do any measuring before I started cutting and drilling. I just threw it all on there. If you think you're going to be changing things or not quite sure how you want it laid out, you probably want to measure and be certain before you start drilling or cutting. Other than that, the only other things I needed to invest in to get this project done, I ordered some various electrical connections and heat shrink tubes and crimp tubes to help with the wiring. I got a soldering iron and a Dremel tool, and that's pretty much all I needed to make things work. So hope this helps some of you that are trying to make decisions. Feel free to reach out if you need any help. Thanks.